Welcome to the lovely, effervescent Ken Mason.
Hello.
Ken has been with the Teddington Theatre Club and by default Hampton Hill Theatre for many years. Do you know how many, Ken? Can you remember?
Not quite, but I think I joined in about 1975, 6, something like that.
So you were around in the old building, as
Yes.
it's called.
Yes, at Hampton Court House.
And what would you say was the main difference between Hampton Court House and the current Hampton Hill Theatre?
Hampton Court House is quite small. It seated about 100, and the transition, in a way, was huge to go from a comparatively small building to one this size. It was a big leap.
In a good way.
Oh, yes, it was. But it was different.
And what actually made the club make the move in the first place?
We had a long lease from the local authority, and they wanted us out so they could sell off the building. And with lots of various negotiations, they gave us a site. Not on the one we're at the moment, it was back towards the park originally.
So did we have to negotiate to get a better spot with a street frontage?
No, it was to suit the developers that built this building and the housing estate.
And I know that the fundraising element was crucial, wasn't
Yes.
it, to this?
Yeah.
And you've kindly loaned me a letter that we were granted by the Arts Council of England a national lottery grant for up to £1,668,711 precisely from the National Lottery Fund. And you mentioned when we were speaking earlier about Eric Yardley, who had been responsible for getting a lot of funding.
Yes, he was an amazing guy. He ran the youth group at the Old Theatre, but he also took on the fundraising. And he was very dogged, very persistent. And he would write to some organisation who would say, we're building our own theatre, we need funds, could you help us and whatnot? And the reply would come back and say, well, yes, but at the present time, unfortunately, we won't be able to help you in this regard. And then he'll wait about a month later, or perhaps 6 weeks, and he'll write again, and he'll say, I don't know if you remember, but we asked if you would be able to help us with funding for our new theatre, and you weren't able to at that particular time. Are you in now a position to be able to help us? And another letter would probably come back and say, no, unfortunately, we're still in the same position. And he will wait another month or 6 weeks or something like that. And then he would write another letter. He'd say, I don't know if you remember, but we've written a couple of times wondering if you in any way would be able to help. And the upshot was, I think the firm said, oh, for goodness sake, give him something.
It just came to go away.
And it worked. I don't know how much he personally raised, but it was tens of thousands of pounds.
That's
He was
amazing.
absolutely brilliant.
It's amazing. And I know the other person who was really instrumental in getting the whole thing off the ground was Michael Elliott.
Yes, well, he was a solicitor, and he gave hours and hours of time dealing with the local authority, the Arts Council, the builders, the developers and everything. He again gave virtually thousands of pounds worth of time to us. So we were very, very lucky in that regard, yes.
I've heard a story that Michael was instrumental in actually naming the place. And the reason it was called a playhouse
Yes.
was because there wasn't going to be another playhouse. So we were Hampton Hill Playhouse because there was nothing similar to it in the West End or
Yes,
something
yes,
like that. Which is
yes.
quite nice.
Eric Yardley was keen on that too, yes.
So in between sort of moving from one place to the other, I mean, was there somewhere to store everything? Did the show still go on?
Yes, we had what was virtually a studio theatre in Craig Hall in Teddington, which held all our wardrobe stuff. And we also did studio plays there. In those days, of course, you had to do a studio production before you were allowed to do a production in the main building. They were very similar to studio here.
And were there still larger productions put on somewhere else?
Yes, in our main theatre, before we moved, we did 12 productions a year.
And in the interim, was it, you were in Thames Ditton, I think?
Yes, I think it was the Vera Fletcher Hall at Thames Ditton.
So that must have been quite a change in culture to actually have to have the costumes stored off-site and bring them in and all of those things.
Yes, I didn't have an awful lot to do with that because I was chairman at the time, and hours were taken up with negotiating with the builders, seeing that the technical people and the artistic people stayed, because we had a risk of people just leaving. And so we got a couple of committees going to sort of stabilise the artistic side and the technical side. And then they were doing plans for the new building as we thought it might be.
I know that you've done everything in the theatre. You act, you direct, you've written, you've done all the technical roles pretty much. So how different was the technical side when you moved into Hampton Hill Theatre as it is now?
My training in sound was taped reels, and the test was to do a ring of bells so they appeared to come ringing naturally, and it was cutting this tiny bit of tape and sticking it together with sticky tape. It was quite interesting.
Don't know we're born now, do we, with all this digital stuff?
And the board for lighting, you had virtually two boards. One was the one who was operating, and the other board was doing the presets. So you had two up there to do that. It was all much more hands-on.
Because you've done all of this stuff with Teddington Theatre Club, what was your background before? Where have you come from to be able to turn your hand to all these different things?
When I was younger, I was in the theatre. I did the usual sort of thing, drama school and rep, and I was in very light reviews and musicals and that sort of thing.
You worked with any famous people? I have to ask that.
Yes, I was in a review called Share My Lettuce. We were all in our late 20s, I suppose, and there was Kenneth Williams there, and Maggie Smith, and a few others.
And then the dizzy heights of Hampton Hill after that.
No, actually, Hampton Hill had been great because you couldn't have the experience in the professional theatre that you can have in the amateur theatre. I mean, we have a chance to do everything artistically, technically, front of house, bar, you name it. You have the opportunity to do the whole lot, which you'd never have in the professional theatre.
So the big news of the day for the last year or so has been the leaking roof at Hampton Hill Theatre. You tell me that it's not news.
No,
it's not new news.
Right from the start, these architects that built this building, they said that they had experience of theatre, and they were very naughty because they didn't have that experience. They only knew how to build houses. And I remember as the shell was going up, when we've more or less completed, even then water was pouring down the walls. And the architect somehow was also project managing his own work. So we would go round with his snagging list, checking on the stuff that he had done himself, and it was a very, very strange position.
It sounds like a French farce.
Yes, it could. Eventually we had to dispense with his services.
So when you sacked the architects, Ken,
yes,
and sent them on their merry way, were they replaced with another architect, or was it a designer?
No, the building, the shell, was virtually completed. So we were then ready to start looking for theatre designers.
So the exterior was
that was done. Yes.
And as safe as you could expect with that leaking roof.
Yes, oh yes, with water pouring down the walls.
And that's when Michael Holden came into the picture.
Yes.
Who was very helpful.
Oh, that was absolutely perfect. Our first application was turned down because of the business plan, and we hadn't really realised the amount of detail we would have to supply. And the fellow who turned us down, I asked him, would it be possible to give us a name of theatre designers that we could apply to when we reapply? He said, well, you shouldn't really, but he gave us 3 names. The first one said he wasn't interested. The second one thought we were too small or didn't want to bother with us at all. And the third one I was told be unlikely to get was Michael Holden. So I phoned him and then started giving him my pitch about this new theatre that we're building, and we're looking for funding and all the rest of it. And then he said, oh, just a minute. He said, did you say you're amateur company? I said, yes. He said, do you know, I've never worked with an amateur company before. And he took us on.
Wonderful.
Recently, he'd designed the Globe interior, and he was extremely good, and he was wonderful. He completely redesigned the interior of this building.
Originally, it wasn't as big a capacity, was it, the theatre?
With this architect, we had a 100-seat theatre. Where the foyer ends, that was a huge atrium, then went right up to a glass roof, very impressive, and then a sort of gallery round where there was a door into the studio, and that was it.
Gosh, it's quite different now. 197 seats now.
Yes, yes.
And
yes,
about 50 in the studio, I think we get, don't we?
Yes.
Yes. And has the studio space, has that changed much?
Oh, yes. Where the lighting grid is, that wasn't there. There was this low roof, sort of a committee room, really. It couldn't be a theatre at all. But it was Michael Holden that punched a hole in the top and put that through. Yes, it was Michael Holden that designed it, so we had 2 levels rather than this great atrium.
Ken, tell me about the artwork we've got. We've got a lovely portrait of Noel Coward.
Part of the condition of getting the lottery grant was that we should have a work of art and a work of sculpture. And as the Noel Coward Society had given us a great deal of money, we decided we would commission somebody to do a portrait of Noel Coward, and we would call it the Noel Coward Room.
And that's now the Studio Theatre.
Now the Studio Theatre, yes. And the other bit of architecture you'll see at the bottom of the stairs going down to the auditorium from the first floor, there is a brick sculpture. It's made to look like a sort of trompe l'oeil sculpture, made out of, he called it rubbed brick. You'll find the scratch lines as if you're looking through a distance with these lines. But, of course, it's so close to you and it's so narrow, it's only sort of a couple of bricks wide, that nobody notices it. Which is a shame, because he spent an awful lot of time doing it.
Oh, that is a shame. And anyone else would have had a bust of Shakespeare or something. So I quite like the fact that we've got a wall. That's nice. And tell me about your time with the actual club. And I was saying earlier, you have done everything. What do you enjoy doing the most?
What do I enjoy the most? I think I enjoyed the most what I was doing at the time. I think because the possibilities of doing so much in this club in so many different ways, you enjoy what you're doing at the moment. I don't like the idea of acting anymore. It scares the pants off me. So.
All those words.
Directing I would still like, but I find it quite tiring. It's the commitment. So I like to do things that have not too much commitment at the moment.
So back in the day, did you have a role that you particularly enjoyed playing the most?
Not really, no. Perhaps the last one I did was quite fun. I quite enjoyed. We did Dad's Army, and I was that poor old chap that did the first aid.
Private Godfrey.
Yes,
with his
yes, I
sister
quite
Dolly.
enjoyed that.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would say, my humble opinion, that you're kind of the epitome of a really good team player and
thank you
club
very
member.
much.
No, you are, because you do everything. You know, we see you on the bar,
Well, that's
managing
part
front
of the fun,
house.
isn't it, of a club, which is more difficult now than it used to be in the old theatre, because attitudes were totally different. You were a club member, and you weren't, as an actor, peripatetic. You were just in your club. Everything was just for your particular club. But times change.
So was that the same for the technicians, Ken, that they wouldn't go from one company to another?
Yes, it just happened like that. We were very fortunate again in having to do our lighting. Chris Davis, who did lighting for television, and theatre was so different. Again, he did it for enjoyment, so that we were very lucky. He set up a lot of the lighting grids and that sort of thing at the old theatre. Oh, and at Craig Hall, our studio theatre, he set up all the lighting for that.
There seems to have been an army over the years of willing volunteers.
Yes.
And it's incredible, really, when you think of the amount of money that was raised and you see the size of this building, that it was basically all done by people who were doing it on a part-time basis in their
Yes.
spare time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. So that was a real commitment to the
It
club
was,
in
it
order
was.
so that we got
Yes.
the theatre, wasn't
Yes,
it?
the 2 years, the transition 2 years was a real learning curve and a wonderful experience to go from that and to create this.
So would you say that things have changed a lot in terms of the club ethos and the type of shows that are done?
Yes,
And
yes. The type of shows for its time is about the same, but the attitude and ethos is totally different because there are fewer clubs now, and some are so small they're more like production companies and just use the same pool of actors that all the other clubs use.
and technicians.
Oh, yes, yes.
And have you found that there are fewer people who are willing to muck in and get behind the bar and all of that stuff?
Yes, that has changed. I think more of our members just want to act, really, which is fine.
Really, I suppose it's similar to what you were saying earlier about the professional theatre. Everything is much more siloed.
Yes.
Yes, so
Oh,
people
yes.
just come to do what they do.
What they do and then go.
Yeah.
Yes. There was a funny sort of, I don't know if you call it loyalty, but a bit of pride in your particular club. Mm-hmm. I feel the same about this, that I've been part of it. But those that don't have that sort of background, haven't, say they come newly to the district and there's a chance to act. And that's as far as it goes, I think.
Well, the lovely thing is that everyone who walks through the door for the first time says what a fantastic building it is. So for people like you who were there at the beginning and actually made it happen, that must give you a real feeling of satisfaction.
Yes. Oh, I love the building.
Yeah,
Yes. No, I think there's something that sort of gets built into the structure, into the brickwork, that you come in here and you feel comfortable, you know, feel at home.
And the building's now housing so many different things as well.
Yes.
So we have movies, all those classes at weekends for the children and everything.
Yes.
And my understanding is that hasn't always happened.
No, that's a good side, I think. We have the opportunity of having so many different organisations coming here. But, Marku, that's necessary to keep us alive.
Yes.
Our own productions, unfortunately, wouldn't pay the bills.
I remember in the dark days of lockdown, the amount of people who run other theatre clubs and companies saying to me how lucky they felt that they didn't have a building. The actual cost of having to keep
Yes.
it going, and the need to keep other people coming through the door,
Yes.
and new and different audiences
Yes.
in order to keep us afloat.
Yes.
But
Yes.
it's all positive stuff, because the more different types of people who come in for the more different types of stuff that we
Yes,
do.
which means you've got to have a very varied programme. The
Makes a
things that we
difference.
would never need to have in the past, but a great need now.
Thank you so very, very much, Ken. It's been
Oh, thank you.
fantastic. Thank you for chatting to us.